Antolin says, I got so derailed this week. I did get very derailed this week. This is true. This is very, very true. How's it going, Tal? How's it going, Melody? How's it going, Gid? How is everybody doing? It said, why be awake? It's overrated. Because I want to have friends over and I want to play games and stuff today. So, like, there's gonna be reasons to be up. At least a few, right? At least a few. How's it going, Melody? So, man, it's been a hell of a week. It has been a hell of a week. Can we just accept that? We lost Platner because of all kinds of dumb shit that he did. And now we're just kind of trying to function, watching everybody freak out, trying to figure out who's going to actually be replacing him. The Dems are debating whether or not they're going to be replacing him with certain people, but the problem that they're going to run into, that they're running into right now, is that whoever they pick is not going to be somebody that they actually got elected. Like, we saw how this went with Harris, right? We saw what happens when the DNC basically gives us the person that they want us to be voting for instead of us actually picking. Not us as in, like, me and you, because I'm not from Maine, but there were certainly a lot of people who were very, very upset at the way that that situation played out with Harris, and it's I feel like we're going to see a little bit of that again. Progress Only says, so, Michigan Supreme Court said the GOP illegally held 9 bills from Whitmer's desk for 18 months. Bills included increasing required sick time, a change to state employee pension, a minimum wage increase, and requirements for disclosure of financials for legislature. Whitmer, a Democrat, decided to veto them all, claiming timing, which is exactly what the GOP House Speaker was trying to do. I'm pissed. Anyways, I'm lurking, but I'll put an article in the Discord. That's infuriating. How does that make any sense? You get a bunch of bills getting Mitch McConnelled, which I guess could mean the thing that he did with the Supreme Court where he stalled it, or could be being in a vegetative state at this point. Both of them actually really work for that. But watching a bunch of those bills get Mitch McConnelled and then seeing the person who should be pushing them forward afterwards just go, timing's not right now. Timing's not good anymore. Ukulele says, what is the cult of Trump destroying this time? What aren't they destroying? What aren't they destroying? You know what's fascinating? So there was a content creator I used to do a lot of collaborations with back in the day. And this content creator, we did a video, not video, but like there was a stream that he did called Is MAGA a Cult? And I remember being on that stream and having the conversation about like how cults work, the different ways that we use to determine what is or is not a cult, and how well MAGA does or doesn't adhere to it. And the answer to that is it is a loose cult. It is a very, very loose cult. It is not a cult in the same sense that, like, you get, say, the Catholic Church as an organization. It's not a cult in the same sense of the Mormons. It's not a cult in the same sense of Jonestown. But it is still a cult in the way that, like, a cult with loose affiliated cells would be. And now that person who was very anti-Trump is hardcore MAGA. And I don't want to say the person's name because I do not want to give more attention to this person. They thrived on it before, and I don't want them to thrive on it again. But it is so weird. And I know exactly why it happened, too. It's because the people around this individual that used to be, like, they used to be a lot of progressive people, and over time, the people around this individual just started... It became only the MAGA people who were willing to be around them at a certain point. And when that happened, I guess they just decided that the writing on the wall was not, maybe I'm being an asshole. The writing on the wall was, maybe I need to change political affiliations. Melody says the stars are not in alignment for this sacrifice. I don't know if any of you have had a similar situation like that, because I know that that's probably a unique to, like, hyper social circle based content creatorism stuff. I don't know if any of you have had a friend that, like, turned hard MAGA after being very against it, and they wouldn't ever tell you why, but you kind of know that the reason why is that they just want to be able to hang out with the people who are also hardcore MAGA for some reason. Like, that's not a deal breaker for them. Dude being a rapist and diddling kids isn't a deal breaker for some reason. I don't know if that's a situation that's ubiquitous amongst a lot of people, but it is a situation that's frustrating for me. But I don't know. I also, another thing to note, with the Plattner situation, with everything that came out about him, I've learned a couple things about fellow people on the left that maybe frustrate me a little bit. One of those things is that we ostensibly say that forgiveness is not owed to anybody, but redemption is possible, and we argue that prison is... Like, one of the reasons that prison is as fucked up as it is that it doesn't actually rehabilitate people, it just punishes them, and that just makes them do the same things that they were doing all over again and again. Like, we, in the United States, have a super high rate of recidivism. And yet with the Plattner situation, I'm seeing people who ostensibly should have that same idea of, like, reform is possible, people can be awful, and people can change. And then they're just like, but not this guy. But not this one. I don't know, it just felt really weird. And, like, I know the end result of it right now is him dropping out. He's dropped out. The end result of it is him dropping out. The end result of that is a lot of people feeling like their positions were either justified or they were on the wrong, like, they were dying on the wrong hills. But in all of those scenarios, it feels like we have a handful of people who maybe don't practice what they preach. Like, my stances on Reformation are thus. And if I'm ever inconsistent in these stances, please call me out on it. But my stances on Reformation are thus. An abuser is never owed forgiveness. Forgiveness is never something that can be owed, and likewise, you should be a healthy enough individual to be able to improve as a person, irrespective of whether or not forgiveness comes your way. Like, that should not be a prerequisite for your reform. And you should reform in spite of that regardless. Like, the fact that harm was done should be enough reason for you to want to do less harm. This is my thought there. So, I believe that there are very few lines in the sands that I would draw on reform. I think that maybe my line in the sand would be kids. Like, once we're in that category, I cannot bring myself to even fathom giving somebody a second chance, because, like, if you're gonna hurt the most vulnerable people, it is very hard for me to fathom a world in which I would be comfortable with you being anywhere where you could do it again. So that's probably my line in the sand. That one. And I think everybody's probably got a line in the sand. But at the same time, outside of that line in the sand, I feel like most people should be able to reform from whatever heinous things they have been or have done. I think that it's possible, and I think we should encourage it. So they're not owed forgiveness. They also shouldn't need it as a prerequisite for reforming. And I also think reformation is possible and wanted. That's my stance. And I don't know if that is a shared stance amongst a lot of other people, but kind of where I sit. Axo says, I'm in a Shoppers. How dare you? Tal says, hey, sirs, did you see that Trump fired the Election Assistance Commission? I did not see that, no. Ukulele says, I know a couple MAGA people. They're just asshats that either are too dumb, too unwilling to see how destructive Trump's shenanigans are. Aaron says, I think I've seen purity testing going on, especially in fandoms, mainly over ships. I mean, anti-shippers are a thing. Anti-shippers are gonna be a thing for, like, the entirety of the time fandom exists. There's going to be people who go like, no, you cannot ship Tails with Sally Acorn because she married Sonic canonically, and actually, you can't like that because of it. They're dumb. They're dumb. Now, when it comes to Plattner, prior to the sexual assault allegations that came out recently, looking at his past, looking at what we've got, so we've got somebody who was in the military. I can forgive anybody for going into the military. Like, most of the time when you're in the military, that is a financial decision first and foremost, or it is a decision begotten by propaganda, and I can forgive people for making bad choices based on propaganda. But I've seen some people draw that as their line in the sand specifically, and that confused me a lot, because just like, but that's... I get it. Nuremberg was a thing. We know that just doing your job is not an excuse for doing terrible shit. But that is generally not what people sign up to the military for. Not initially. But then he did the mercenary work for Blackwater afterwards. And I'm kind of weird on that one, except for the fact that I know a lot of military veterans, and a shared experience amongst so many veterans is an inability to find work. I actually was reminded about this pretty, not violently, but like pretty harshly when I was watching Anthony Gramalia's video on conservative action slop. And there's a scene from Rambo First Blood where Rambo like goes on a tirade, basically, saying, I was put in charge of $1 million equipment. I could drive a tank. I could be respected. I could do all of this. But when I come home, I can't even hold down a sales job. And I'm not gonna lie, like that, I am not a veteran. I'm not. But I have watched vets in my life from, me being in a military family. I have watched them struggle to find a place to be. Oftentimes, the best way that I've seen veterans be able to function is by grabbing a job that is adjacent to what they did in the military. So, like, my dad was Master Load Sergeant of the Air Force. And he now works as an fleet trainer, basically, for Amazon. His job now is training people to fly aircraft safely so that they can deliver packages, which is the civilian version of what his military responsibilities were. And that seems to be the thing that, like, consistently works best for a lot of people in the military. The problem is that not every job from the military has something analogous to it out in the civilian world. So people getting angry about, like, oh, he went and did the Soldier of Fortune thing. Okay, yeah, no, that is shitty, correct, but at the same time, people do need to survive at a bare minimum, and we know that one of the groups of people that struggles to find and keep work more than anybody are veterans, especially veterans who have PTSD. Which he has PTSD. As far as he has said, and as far as I am willing to accept, he has PTSD as well. So, like, that one's also one that I'm largely willing to forgive, personally. And then the allegation, like, the handful of allegations that came out in regard to the exes that were, like, involved with the Republican Party, I can both hold weight to a victim's statements and also not be willing to take action on them, because statements are not hard evidence. They are a form of soft evidence. Orla says, here's your reminder that veterans are overrepresented in pretty much every group: poverty, homelessness, disability, mental health issues, substance abuse, alcoholism, and that is exactly how you know the government doesn't care, because if they cared, they would fix the systems these people need, because using veterans as an excuse to not help those people and then doing nothing should tell you everything. Tal says, military time counts as time credit in the prison time employment, so that is one thing as well. Though, now you have the compounding problem. Like, let's say that somebody is working in the prison system afterwards. Tal, you work in the prison system. Yay or nay, in the staff, in law enforcement, there is a higher representation of right-wing ideals than left-wing ideals. Also, Steigander says, I went back and watched some of your ancient videos, or people who were responding to your content from way back when you were young Earth creationist and ultra-conservative, and that's why I was willing to give Plattner. I don't think I did content back when I was young Earth creationist. I talked about the fact that I was, but I didn't do content then. But you're basically saying you saw the videos that I made then and then compared to how I am now, I guess is what you're saying, Stygander. Yeah, Tal, correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but that's been the experience that I've seen from friends who have worked in law enforcement. Tal says, I don't work with LEO, aside from other COs, but I also interact enough to ask politics. Gotcha. So I wouldn't even be saying, like, ask politics. Usually, because a lot of people's internal politics kind of begin and end with these things are normalized to me, so I will say them like they are normal. You don't really have to ask people their politics often. You spend enough time around them, and they'll just let you know who they are. Not always, but it happens often enough. Stygander says yes. Okay, so that's... No, that makes sense. I will say, anybody who has the exact same stance on Platinum that I do when it comes to forgiveness, I appreciate y'all having that standard, though I do not expect everybody to have that standard. I actually saw in my comment section plenty of people who were long-time subscribers to my channel, like names that I recognized from years, being ridiculously anti-Platinum, which, again, I completely understand. You can be, but the reasons given sometimes basically boiled down to the buy once, cry once thing. You were this person once, so you're this person forever, and I'm just like... The exact words that I told K-Fox in regards to that is, I sincerely hope that every person with those standards is without sin. And I'm not saying that to be smug, I'm saying that because I am a firm believer that almost every adult that has gone out into the real world and talked with people and been around people has made a fair share of mistakes, a fair share of bad judgment calls, a fair share of things they regret, maybe things that they needed to talk to somebody in therapy about, maybe even have done things that other people have had to talk in therapy about them in regards to. Like, I think that most people who go out into the world and experience it have had those experiences. The longer you are out and interacting with people, the more likely it is that you will make mistakes, that you will hurt somebody, that something will happen. And I would hope that our standards for how we treat other people comport with our own ability to exist within those groups. Like, if you can truly exist sinless, then, I mean, sure. Go right ahead, I guess. But I don't think that anybody does. Like, the only way that you can exist such that you never harm anybody and you never influence anybody in a positive or negative way is by just staying inside your room and never leaving. Like, turning on the neat switch and never turning it off. Sylvie says, this is an abnormal stream schedule for you. It is. But I wanted to get at least one video out on side channel and one video out on main channel because I know that I didn't do anything with Rhino this week. And so there's going to be a bit of a gap there, and this gave me a little bit of time to talk with y'all. I wanted to have maybe one last conversation. Like, now that Platinum is, like, officially dropping out, I wanted to have one last conversation about the whole perspective on the situation that I have, personally. I also talked about the situation with a friend of mine, and I used the exact words, I think maybe my bias clouds my judgment on some of this, because I did have the person that I was involved with that lied about their time in military and basically everything, and then lied about their mom being dead and finding out that their mom actually was alive because I talked with the mother, and then finding out that this person had a pattern of behavior that was consistent with lying and hurting people for better or worse for attention. And so, like, I know that at a population level, there's very few people like that exist, right? It is very difficult to find, in a group of 1,000 people, to guaranteed find, maybe not a narcissist so much, or a pathological liar, but somebody who's got some combination of those things. Like, in a group of 1,000 people, you may find, what, 1 or 2 of them? People who, like, can be legitimately malignant. Because I think most people aren't. I think most people generally want to do good and do decently by their fellow man. How well they execute on that is up for debate. But I believe that most people think they try. Which is one of the reasons why it's so important for us to check each other. Because sometimes in our attempts to be better people, our idea of what a better person makes can actually be damaging. So, like, think of your young earth creationist, conservative Christian, their idea of what a better person is begins and ends with being a bigot. And if that's the case, then you kind of don't want that person being the arbiter of somebody else's morals. Steigander says, I was at one point going to join the military when I was a teen. If anybody here can believe that. I was going to join the Air Force. Like, I can believe it, because I was also going to be doing that. I don't find any of that weird. That's just kind of where I was, too. Fauci says, I want a windbreaker. Yellow says, I considered the military for a short time once, but I decided against it. Gotcha. I don't know. My threshold for forgiveness is maybe not the best. But like I said, the reason that I have it, the reason that I operate the way I do where that's concerned, part of it is my own experiences of being a different person, and the reason I don't immediately believe things to the extent that I would act on them, like what happened with the Plattner situation, is because I have had those experiences where somebody says, no, this person doesn't exist, right? You hear that all the time where somebody says, like, this person you're describing doesn't exist. I'm like, but I know they exist because I lived with them. I did. I lived with a person who did those things and just went through hell as a result of it. So, like, I know that that type of person does in fact exist because I've been here. I've dealt with them personally. But like I said, that does actually cloud my ability to make judgment calls. Because I'm, like I said, and I'm not meaning to, like, bounce around the same thing, but I know that when I get off track, I want to try to get my brain back on track. So I know to get back on track, at a population level, that person I'm describing is rare. But trauma is a thing that will make you remember that person. If you're a woman who's been sexually assaulted, you already have a much, much stronger and worse version of this, where you see people around you as potential predators more often than you see them as potential partners. Because your brain recognizes that a terrible thing happened to it once and it wants to protect it from ever happening again. And a lot of trauma operates that way. You deal with the issue once, you never want to see it happen again, so you start seeing it in more places. And if it's in a situation like partner you're with is lying about things, you suddenly start trusting things that are said more often, even when it's other people's partners and other people's situations. So that's where I was coming from with that. Maybe Plattner actually is a horrible person. I don't know. We'll see how he responds in the next few years to how things have gone. Maybe we'll find that he actually does join the MAGA crowd as the next big podcaster. That would really fucking blow. But I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm hoping that my faith in not only him as a Democrat, lukewarm as it may be, but my faith in humanity in general will at least be somewhat rewarded here. Dorita says that would fit the why I left the left for him. Like, he was already a why I left the right person. I wonder if that's what's going to happen. Because that's been the prediction that a lot of people have had. And so, another observation. The people who have had the prediction that he'll do the why I left the left thing, which he may do. But if he does do that, then they will gloat about it, 110%, and I will also say that it will be earned. That'll be earned. But if they end up being wrong, do you think that those same people are going to post about how wrong they were about it? If in 5-10 years from now that doesn't happen, do you think any of them are going to do that? Because, like, I know that I probably wouldn't. if I were the same person, so I don't know if I'd expect other people to do it as well. And I'm not saying that is like a personal slight against anybody like that, because if it's a thing that just falls into the back of your brain, then it falls into the back of your brain. That is how brains work. It ceases being important, so you cease paying attention to it. He's no longer a candidate, so he ceases being important, so you cease paying attention, therefore. But it just feels like the people who were pro-Platner get to eat shit because of this situation. Fair, fine. But there is no lose case for the other side. There is no situation where they go, actually, hold on, we were the ones wrong. Like, the social scenario does not seem like that's actually built up for them. Or even possible for them. It just feels a little weird. It feels a little weird. Ukulele says, sort of running again in the future, turning into a MAGA podcaster is probably about the only way he stays on the collective radar. Right, that's why I was saying that it doesn't seem like things are set up in such a way that the scenario of any of them going, actually, even if he did these horrible things, he at least did stand by his principles and didn't change into a different, worse person. Like, the scenario for that to occur isn't there. Because that scenario is either he runs again, and we do this entire song and dance again, or he fades into obscurity, and maybe his politics change, maybe they don't. Steigander says, I don't see right-wingers who are dead set on the left being evil ever admitting they are wrong. Fair, but I'm not critiquing them right now. I'm mainly looking at my comrades, is the best way to put it. The people for whom I am arm in arm with, sharing arms and bread with. For whom there can be a million myriad situations where they get to be very, very gloatful about a person being horrible when they predicted correctly, but there's not a fail state where they have to eat curd. And I don't need there to be a fail state. I don't need that emotionally. The observation is just there that because that fail state doesn't seem to exist, engagement with this in almost any way feels like not a losing battle. That's not the way to put it. A fruitless effort? Probably. Because I give it to the dark side, I bought a perpetual license for Filmora. I mean, I have a license for DaVinci. But lifetime licenses, I think, are fine. It's not Adobe. But yeah, consider that shower thoughts, basically. I am perfectly willing to accept Platner is a horrible person if evidence to that seems to surface, and right now evidence seems to be leaning at least a little bit in that direction. I'm willing to accept that as a possibility. I'm willing to accept that as the scenario. I am just wondering if the people on my side who have similar interests in being anti-capitalist and getting us all healthcare and getting people living wages, I'm wondering if those people who are on my side have a similar scenario where they have to admit that they are wrong instead. Or if there is no scenario where they could be wrong. Because if it's the latter, that actually kind of scares me. You never want to know that the people who you are arm in arms with could turn on you, though it's always a possibility. But, like, if there's no fail state with which they would admit that, hey, a person is better, hey, a person has changed, but there's a million myriad fail states where they'll admit that a person is horrible, I don't know. Feels weird. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitta, you know I'm not saying that last part, Sylvie Snow, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.